Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. This is Ryan Boyer here. And this week, Eric is off. I'm joined by my old friend, Mr. Seth Trachtman. Seth and I go back quite a ways. What was it?
2009.
2009 is your first year at Fanball. I started there when it was a different name of a different company. The company name was different. Roto Times then. 2006 is when I started. Yeah, Seth and I go back a ways in the biz, as they say, or maybe they don't say. But yeah, today's and Seth also, a fellow Tout Wars participant. You're in the 15-team mixed?
Yes.
How are we doing this year in that?
I am. So there is a glut of 6 teams within about 4 points of each other, and I'm in that glut. So I'm doing well, but first place would be a lot better than 6th place. And any given minute, I'm in a different place. So I can't complain. I had Acuna as the first overall pick and lost him. So I really can't complain.
Yeah, tough to recover from that. I'm in the alternate categories Tout League, and I drafted Garrett Cole is my second pick, and Yuri Perez also a pretty high pick. I still wind up with Garrett Crochet, which we'll get into in a little bit, is turning sour now, but looking really good for a while. And like Eric Fetty, saved by the White Sox. Who knew? But yeah, this is it's our FAAB show this week, of course, our Saturday FAAB show. But first, as always, hit on the latest headlines, and we had some interesting positional decisions announced by the Dodgers yesterday. It had seemed as recently as just a few days ago that the plan was to bring Mookie Betts back at shortstop, but they've seemingly reversed course. Dave Roberts announced yesterday that he's going to be back as a full-time right fielder. Didn't seem, kind of reading between the lines, like Mookie was thrilled about the decision. I know when they asked him about it, he said that it was quote unquote mostly a mutual decision. But being the team player that he is, he just says he wants to win, so he's good with going to right field. I guess that means we're going to see Miguel Rojas as the everyday shortstop for the Dodgers rest of season. Gavin Lux, we'll mention here in a little bit as well, going to remain at second base. But yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of the fallout from not only Mookie Betts, but the Dodgers also announced that Tommy Edman would be seeing most of his playing time on his rehab assignment, which he is resuming now in center field. So it sounds like that's probably going to be the main position for him when he comes back.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We didn't expect this from the Dodgers, but they have hitting issues in the outfield. Andy Pajas hasn't been great in center field. Hayward hasn't been great in right field. And then shortstop, obviously, without Mookie, has not been great hitting-wise. So it's kind of interesting. I think they're just saying, no matter who we take out of the lineup, we're not losing much. And Mookie didn't grade great at shortstop. So I think they're just, putting defense ahead of offense here.
Right.
Obviously, if you have one of those outfielders that's going to lose their job, that hurts. If not that they've been propping up your lineup very much, but it hurts. But yeah, it is pretty interesting. I assume here they said that Mookie was going to bat second to split Shohei Ohtani and Freeman in the lineup. And I assume Edman, when he played for the Cardinals against right-handers, he usually bat 8th or 9th. So I assume he's going to do that with the Dodgers, but we'll see.
Yeah, and he often hit leadoff against lefties, but they're not going to move Shohei around regardless of of what hand the opposing pitcher throws with. So I think Edman's probably going to be towards the bottom of that lineup, both against righties and lefties. So doesn't really change anything practically in terms of Mookie's impact. But as you mentioned, Andy Paez is, after getting off to that really great start the first few weeks, really hasn't been very good. I'm actually surprised that they've kind of stuck with him as long as they have. I guess they didn't think they really had other great options, but yeah, the days of Paez having any fantasy relevance for redraft leagues probably over now. Miguel Rojas in your deeper leagues, I guess his value ticks up a little bit. I mean, he's hitting well for Miguel Rojas, which that's a pretty low bar to clear. Not really a fantasy relevant player outside of deep leagues, but still interesting to note the decisions that the Dodgers have made. Another guy I wanted to touch on, Garrett Crochet. As we mentioned earlier, it's not going well for him. Another bad start yesterday against the Cubs, gave up 4 home runs. He hasn't had a decent start since June. And I don't think he's gone beyond 4 innings in any of those starts. I mean, partly that's due to workload restrictions. A couple of those starts, he hasn't been bad, but he just didn't pitch deep into the games because they're keeping an eye on his workload. But I guess my question to you is, what do you do with Garrett Crochet in fantasy? Because, I mean, for the first 3 months of the season, he was a fantasy ace, even on the White Sox. Prior to this rough stretch, he was leading, I think, all of baseball, or at least the American League in strikeouts. He's still up there pretty high. And, just looking dominant, but obviously the White Sox continue to be a dumpster fire, not a good bet for wins, and you can't get any wins if you're not going at least 5 innings in a start. So are you considering dropping Crochet at this point? And if so, like, what depth of the league would you consider making that move?
I'm actually in this position in a RotoWire online championship, which is a 12-team league, and he's helped carry my pitching staff the whole year, but I haven't used him in probably 3 weeks. Yeah. And that's also a league where you don't have IL spots, so every bench spot really matters, and I'm absolutely cutting him this week. I think this is it. I think to borrow a quote from Derek Bell, he's gone into Operation Shutdown here. He has
Derek
not
Bell pool. I like it.
Yeah, he hasn't thrown. I look at this. He has not thrown 80 pitches in a start since July 6th. Obviously he's struggling. He had that whole thing where he basically did an unofficial no trade clause to prevent himself from getting traded by the White Sox. The workload, the workload's the big thing. It's really hard for him to bounce back if they're not going to let him pitch beyond the 4th inning. And if they're not going to let him pitch beyond the 4th inning, I mean, what upside is there really?
He's still getting strikeouts. He's still getting well over a strikeout per inning. The velocity yesterday was down a little bit, but not like concerning. Like, I think I saw his 4-seamer was down like 0.6 miles per hour. So, I mean, he can still get swings and misses with his stuff right now, but looking more homer prone of late. And like you said, it's not all his doing if they're just not going to let him, pitch more than 4 innings per start. Like, no amount of skill is enough to overcome that kind of workload restrictions. And as you mentioned, especially in a league like on NFBC where you don't have IL spots, you can't afford to waste those roster spots. And if you're not starting him multiple weeks on end, we're in August 12th, the next scoring period. There's just not that much room for him to make an impact the rest of the way. And he might get outright shut down. I know they're saying he doesn't want to get completely shut down this season, but we've also seen that we don't know what to expect in regards to how the White Sox and how Crochet are handling it. Because when he came out with the unofficial rules of his own that caught the White Sox by surprise. So who knows what they're going to do with his workload? But I'm with you. Like, ideally, you'd hang on to him because he does still have the potential to make a handful of difference-making starts. But if you're really pressed for that roster spot, I think it is okay to cut him. Got a question for Uncle Ted here. Grosset, I assume, is Crochet. Would you drop first Garrett Crochet or Cutter Crawford? Yeah, Crawford's been pretty up and down lately. He's also had some home run issues. I think I would hang on to Cutter Crawford over him. What do you think in that instance?
Yeah, Crochet is a definite drop. So I would keep Cutter. I will say with Cutter, he does have a bit of an arm injury history, and he's already, at least in the major leagues, hit the most innings he's ever thrown. So that might be what we're seeing here in terms of him just wearing down. I wouldn't feel comfortable using Crawford right now, but I don't think I would cut him yet if you have a choice.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. All right, another big piece of news, and maybe the most relevant for fantasy of these three headlines we're going to hit on. Camilo Doval got sent down by the Giants. I don't know about you, Seth. I was kind of anticipating that he would be removed from the closer role. Didn't think they would outright send him down to AAA, but I guess if you don't feel like you can trust him in the ninth, you probably don't really feel like you can trust him in the 6th or the 7th or the 8th right now either. So they just decided to send him down to AAA Sacramento for a while, hopefully kind of right the ship down there. Bob Melvin did say after yesterday's game, it seemed kind of iffy prior to the game as far as who would step in at closer. He didn't immediately name a closer, and beat writers were speculating, obviously, Ryan Walker, Jordan Hicks, Taylor Rogers all came up as possibilities. But then after the game, Melvin said via Susan Slusser of the San Francisco Chronicle that Ryan Walker would get the first chance to close. So looks like he's going to be taking over in the 9th inning, having a great year. He will be part of the rundown. He's actually going to be the first FAAB priority name that I'm going to mention. So we won't go too in depth, but just your thoughts on the Giants' decision here.
It was a shocker to me that Doval was sent down, and it might be the right choice if, there's something they clearly see that they think they can fix. But I could not think of another closer situation where a closer has been sent down to the minors directly from the closing role. Can you think of any other example of that?
Off the top of my head, I mean, not in recent memory. It's usually the MO is to kind of stick them in low leverage situations for a while, not send them down to the minors. That partly is, I guess, is so many closers also probably don't have options left because they tend to be established relievers. So that's a little bit of a rare instance when Doval has options left. But yeah, them completely sending him down to the minors caught me off guard as well.
Yeah, I mean, with Ryan Walker, he's been absolutely dominant. He's clearly earned the role. The only, he's been their best reliever. The only thing was, they had two other relievers, Jordan Hicks and Taylor Rogers, who have the closing experience. But
yeah,
I think just from a team perspective, if he's your best reliever, that's what they're doing. They're promoting their best reliever. He's clearly been it. He may not have that much leeway with those guys with experience behind them, but yeah, this seems like just a situation of this is our best guy. Let's put him in the most high leverage spot.
Yep. All right, perfect segue. Now we're going into our FAAB priorities, and I'll lead us off with Ryan Walker. He was already pretty heavily rostered in Yahoo leagues. That kind of caught me by surprise when I looked that up. At 34% already rostered for a guy with, prior to Doval's kind of meltdown, he didn't really have that much of a chance of garnering saves, but obviously he's in the driver's seat now. As you mentioned, been the Giants' best reliever this season, 2.24 ERA. .088 whip, 73-13, strikeout to walk rate over 60 and 1/3 innings. Can handle both righties and lefties. 484 OPS versus righties, 621 OPS versus lefties. In watching him pitch, he's got he stands on the far third base side of the rubber and has like a cross, or maybe it's the first side, and then he has a crossfire delivery. But just the way he pitches, I don't know how righties hit him at all. And by the numbers, you can see that they really don't. But he's handled lefties as well, so the platoon's not really an issue. It's comforting to hear Melvin come out and say that Walker is the first up, but I do think Jordan Hicks could potentially be a threat since they put him back in the bullpen. Velocity has come back up. He's been hitting 99 regularly. Obviously, he has the closing experience, as you mentioned. Kind of flamed out pretty badly there as a starter towards the end, hence the move back to the bullpen. But we've seen him be dominant at times as a reliever. Taylor Rogers is also having a great year too, which I'm going to touch on him in the budget section. But yeah, Ryan Walker, must roster right now. I think they would prefer Duvall get his job back eventually. Melvin said as much, but if you're going to send him down to AAA, you're probably going to give him at least a few weeks. So Ryan Walker will have an opportunity to run with the job, I think.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The other thing, in terms of skill level, it's hard for me to imagine a better pitcher getting promoted to closer the rest of this year. It's possible. There's probably, maybe 10 relievers that aren't closers right now that are maybe as good as Walker or better, but that's it. I mean, in terms of skill level, this is about as good as you're going to get if you're looking to spend FAAB on a closer. He may not have the most job security of anybody that's going to get promoted the rest of the year, but in terms of skill level, I mean, this is as good as you're going to get probably.
Yeah, and speaking of skill level, your first reliever, maybe not quite as high of a skill level, but he does look like he has a closer job. So who's your first FAAB recommendation?
Miami Marlin Calvin Faucher. So it's pretty clear at this point that he's Miami's closer. I believe he's had 2 saves since Tanner Scott was traded. He's come in the 9th consistently in the most high leverage spots. He's been pretty good. He does not have great control, and that's clear, and it's been clear his whole career. It's been clear recently. He'll walk the bases loaded pretty easily all the time. So this is just a situation where the old saying, saves are saves. And, one of the excuses, that might give someone hesitancy to picking him up is, oh, Miami's not very good. But, if you look at, Fangraphs rest of season projections, the best team is only projected to win about 10 more games than the worst team. So, I mean, there's, in terms of wins the rest of the way, there's not that big of a difference between, a Ryan Walker, if he were to keep the job, and a Faucher in terms of save opportunities. So, I mean, he's a must pick up if you need saves. There's really not anybody else I see in that bullpen who can, really easily take the job from him unless Faucher just face plants. But, Bender has some experience there, and his velocity has been way down this year compared to before he had arm injuries. So for me, Faucher, it's about as safe a job as you can have right now, despite the fact he's not the most skilled pitcher to have that job.
Yeah, I like Andrew Nardi in that bullpen, but he's got some major split issues. He's got the best, I think, probably swing and miss stuff in that bullpen, but he's been consistently coming in versus lefties earlier in the game. So I'm with you. I think Faucher is the clear guy there. This situation, another bullpen situation, is less clear, I think, but Uncle Ted right on cue. Justin Martinez has gotten the call in the 9th twice this week. That's my next pick, Justin Martinez. I think it was actually Uncle Ted who mentioned last week Justin Martinez was his pick to take over as the Diamondbacks closer. And Eric and I were a little hesitant because Diamondbacks have had other options, and he's a younger guy who's had control issues, but I think it's pretty indisputable. He has the best stuff in that bullpen. Has not notched the last 2 saves for the Diamondbacks. He was also getting loose when Sewald had a shaky outing with a 4-run lead earlier this week. Picked up a win Friday on a walk-off home run. He didn't hit the walk-off home run. He pitched the 9th inning in a scoreless game. Then the Diamondbacks hit a walk-off home run by a guy who we're also going to recommend later, by the way. But yeah, 1.93 ERA for Justin Martinez, 62-26 strikeout to walk rate in 51 1/3 innings. Averages 100 miles an hour with that sinker. And he pairs that with a splitter that's generated whiffs at a 50.5% rate, a slider with a whiff rate of 49.4%. So triple digits heater, has 2 off-speed pitches that he can miss bats with. Only issue I see with Martinez is the control, and that is definitely a problem. Also, he's lacking in closer experience, of course. That can matter to a manager. I still think Torey Lovallo would like to see Paul Sewald get that job back. I do think that there's a pretty decent chance that could happen. Still think Paul Sewald's a pretty good pitcher. But he did struggle earlier this week, as I mentioned, just barely escaped a messy situation against the Guardians. So probably not going to happen in the imminent future, and Justin Martinez looks like the guy to roster in that bullpen right now.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Even with the Sewald point, I think Sewald's issues are more mechanical than anything else, and they would probably like him to get the job back. I think they ultimately, in a high-pressure playoff situation, probably trust Sewald more, a guy that can more consistently throw strikes. But he's not there yet. So, yeah, Martinez is probably the guy, and he has kind of Camilo Duvall vibes for me because he throws 100 and he's an extreme ground ball pitcher who doesn't always know where the ball is going.
Yep, more potential closer talk, I guess, because this guy is not currently getting saves, but interesting nonetheless. Who's your next recommendation?
Michael Kopech, who is a relatively new Los Angeles Dodger. The Dodgers bullpen is kind of interesting. They've kind of gone with a closer committee.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like Brustar Graterol before he hurt his hamstring. I thought that he might emerge for the saves, but now we're kind of looking, is Daniel Hudson the guy? They've used Vesey a little bit. Evan Phillips is definitely not the guy right now. Kopech has been not only dominant since he joined the Dodgers, he was dominant for 4 or 5 appearances before he joined the Dodgers. And we know he has dominant stuff. And, the Dodgers are a team that fixes players. They fix pitchers. Kopech hasn't been great this year, but over the last month, he's been quite good. He definitely should be rostered. And if you need saves, he could emerge. I mean, I would say maybe a 50% chance he emerges as their prime closer before the end of the year with the stuff that he has and how successful he's been lately.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wanted to keep a close eye on his pitch mix after he joined the Dodgers to see if they changed anything, and they really haven't yet. He's throwing basically all 4-seamers so far. He is throwing more cutters than sliders. I think that's a bit of a change from the White Sox days, but he's not throwing many of either. He's just throwing a lot of 4-seamers, and maybe it's a mechanical thing that they've potentially fixed with him. But as you mentioned, he had pitched well of late with the White Sox as well. I don't trust the Dodgers to necessarily give the closer job to one guy at this point. As you mentioned, if there's a Dodgers reliever I'd like to roster rest of season, I think it's probably Daniel Hudson, but the margin is so slim that in Kopech, I mean, you can totally envision him going on just a sublime run the rest of the regular season and in the postseason, and him being like a dominant closer next year for the Dodgers. I could completely see that happening. I don't know if we're there yet, but I'm with you that he's a must roster, especially while he's pitching so well currently. Now we go from arguably one of the better pure stuff guys in baseball to guy with not great pure stuff. Switching over to the starting pitching ranks, Paul Blackburn, really good first 2 starts with the Mets. 6 innings, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts in each of his first 2 starts. And this next week, he gets to go up against his former team, the A's, and the Marlins at home. So that's, at the very least, he's looking like a really good streaming option for the upcoming week. I mean, he's going to have a good chance for wins on a hot Mets team. This is certainly a low upside play. I don't really need to harp on that too much. It's pretty obvious. But you're looking for streaming options, especially the upcoming week. Blackburn's got a couple of good matchups. They've let him go 6 innings his last 2 starts, as I mentioned. So I like him as a streaming option at the very least.
Yep, I concur. It's a non-impressive. I'll pick him up this week, probably drop him next Sunday after second start kind of pick up.
Yep. Speaking of unimpressive, your next option.
I hope his family is not listening.
Yeah, when this trade went down, I'm still flummoxed what happened with this trade, but yeah, I won't spoil anything for you. Go ahead and go with your next pick.
A big left-handed starting pitcher now for the Baltimore Orioles named Trevor Rogers, who early in his career with the Marlins looked like an ace and was averaging 95 miles an hour on his fastball. This year has looked like a 5th starter at best, averaging 92 miles per hour on his fastball. And I think this is why this was such a shocking trade. I mean, you can see it on the radar gun. This is not the same pitcher of a few years ago before he had a back injury and other random ailments. But I think that there's 2 things that make Trevor Rogers intriguing. One, obviously the past ability. I mean, he has shown that he's an ace in the past. It was a different version of him. And 2, the Orioles. The Orioles have obviously fixed quite a few pitchers. They have a large park where it's hard for right-handed hitters to hit the ball out of the park, which should help Trevor Rogers. That said, would I pick up Trevor Rogers? Maybe for free if I could stash him on my bench, or if it were a keeper league. Would I use Trevor Rogers right now? Absolutely not. I don't even know if I would use him against the White Sox. I mean, he has not been good with the Orioles so far. There's no reason to think, Grayson Rodriguez is hurt, but so Rogers is not going to lose his rotation spot there, but there's still no reason right now to think that he's suddenly going to be a good fantasy play.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I'm trying to seize the positives in, if the Orioles see something in him, then maybe that's good enough. He's already mentioned that they've already given him more mechanical pointers, more analytical information than he received with the Marlins. I don't know if that's kind of sour grapes. I mean, Peter Bendix over there is a Rays guy. I got to imagine that they've got their hands on plenty of analytical stuff. I don't know if he has a little bit of an axe to grind or what, but I do trust that the Orioles might be able to fix him. But I agree that it's probably more of a 2025 thing than a 2024 thing. He does have 2 starts next week, so if you're in the mood for a gamble and you think they can fix him right now, then roll that dice. But I'm with you that it's pretty iffy. Moving on to the hitting side, mentioned him a little bit earlier during the Dodgers talk, but Gavin Lux doing some interesting things in the second half, to say the least. 375, 455, 643, his slash line in the second half. He's got 3 home runs, already in the second half, matching his total from the first half. 12 RBI already in the second half. That's half as many he had in the first half in just 17 games. Over the All-Star break, his uncle, I believe, is a college baseball coach, and he did some hitting with him, and his uncle encouraged him to just swing a lot harder, and he's done that. I know Mike Petriello from StatCast and MLB.com and stuff he had an article talking about the biggest gainers in terms of bat speed metrics, which they just added to Baseball Savant. And Gavin Lux is up quite a bit in the second half, so he's legitimately swinging the bat harder. He's also striking out more, but that's certainly been a trade-off that has been worth it so far. Pull rate is up. Strikeouts are up, as I mentioned, but his hard hit rate is also way up, 44% in the second half after 37% in the first half. Dodgers moving him up to the third spot in the batting order while Freddie Freeman was away. And since Freeman has come back, Gavin Lux has been hitting fifth, so still a pretty good spot in the Dodgers lineup. Obviously, there's still pedigree there with Gavin Lux. It's been a little while since he was viewed as a elite prospect, and obviously has not panned out on the whole so far, but doing some interesting things. And the Dodgers, as you mentioned before, it's odd because the bottom half of their lineup hasn't been great this season. They could really use a Lux breakout in the second half. Don't know that I'm totally buying it on it happening, but he's doing enough now to pique my interest for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm very interested to see where he's going to bat when Mookie comes back. I mean, the other thing that, for Lux, not good for the Dodgers, but good for Lux, is that Will Smith has been so bad. So, that can keep Lux in that middle of the order. I'm guessing he's going to be hitting fifth or sixth here when Mookie comes back, but that's still good, and that's still a great position to be in on the Dodgers.
Yep. And we got a guy coming back from injury for your next recommendation. Who is it?
So Kerry Carpenter, who has been out with a back injury, he's currently on a rehab assignment. I believe he's played 3 games on that rehab assignment and really hasn't done anything yet. So we will see exactly when Detroit brings him back, but he will be back here, I would expect, at some point this coming week. Detroit's lineup is bad, but it's in a different position now than when it was when Kerry Carpenter got hurt. Colt Keith is hitting. Colt Keith was not hitting the first 2 months of the season. Obviously Riley Green is still out, but he will, I assume, be back here eventually. And then Justin Henry Malloy has been hitting in the middle of the order, and he's been showing power, not hitting consistently, but he's at least been a guy, that they see in their long-term plan. So I expect them to keep him in the lineup. So it's going to be interesting to see where Kerry Carpenter hits. He was hitting third or fourth when he was in the lineup before the injury. I am guessing they're going to put him somewhere in that area of the lineup, which is obviously a good spot for RBIs and a good spot for plate appearances. But we'll see. But obviously, Kerry Carpenter, between what he showed last year and what he showed before the injury, is, especially in a 12-team or 15-team league, is an obvious plug and play. If you have him rostered, you need to plug him in, and if he's available, you need to go and get him. Yeah,
I mean, they might sit him some or often against lefties, but he's a proven bat at this point. I think a 914 OPS in 50 games prior to the injury, dating back to last year, 838 OPS, 28 home runs, and basically the equivalent of a full season, 622 plate appearances. So proven bat at this point, Kerry Carpenter, and worried about the back injury a little bit. He did have a setback a month or so ago, but he's on the comeback trail now. So hopefully he will get back to 100% and get back in the Tigers lineup soon. My next guy is Tommy Pham, back with the Cardinals and sporting a 935 OPS, a couple home runs in his first 10 games since joining St. Louis. overall in the season, numbers are so-so. 7 home runs, 6 stolen bases. But remember, he didn't start his season until late April and probably a little rusty initially. So, it's basically the equivalent of like a 15-15-ish pace. Tommy Pham has always hit the ball hard. He's still doing that this season, 90.6 mile per hour average exit velocity. And the Cardinals, I think, need him a little more now than they anticipated. I think the plan when they acquired him was just to play him against lefties. But Michael Ciani is hurt now. Lars Nootbaar's been really bad for the last month since he returned from his oblique injury, and he's been on the bench a decent amount of late. Tommy Pham looks like maybe he's even being preferred over Nootbaar, and there's potentially room in the lineup for both of them too, because they can put Brendan Donovan at second base, because Nolan Gorman's strikeout rate, I think, is like 85% since May 1st or something like that. So, yeah, Tommy Pham is, I don't know what the ceiling is at this point, but I mean, he's got power. He's can run a little bit still, and he's showing still those bat to ball skills where he doesn't strike out a whole lot, hits the ball hard. So a fifth outfielder in a roto league, I think he's definitely worth rostering, especially now that it looks like he's going to play more than we anticipated.
Yeah, I concur with that. The other thing I think I saw here, he's got 2 lefty matchups here coming up. Any week where the Cardinals are playing a lot of lefties, that's definitely a spot where you want to plug in Pham.
Yep. All right, our last hitter, Seth, who you got?
So I have the venerable Eloy Jimenez of now the also Baltimore Orioles, former Chicago White Sox, who, if you've ever rostered him in your life, you probably hate him because he's often injured. He is not currently injured, though, and he has been playing well for the Orioles, stealing at bats from Cedric Mullins, playing just about every day so far, and actually hitting, which it's kind of surprising, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised here. Eloy has, prior to this year, has been a pretty consistent power bat. And, you see what Baltimore's done with some other hitters, namely Ryan O'Hearn, kind of fixing other hitters. And Eloy Jimenez has a lot of motivation here. He's probably going to be a free agent after this year. He has motivation to finish strong. It's kind of just ride him out, I think. Ride him out until he gets hurt again. And I hate to say that, but I mean, you look, he's played over 100 games twice since 2019. So he's not a guy you can trust, not a guy that I would go all in on with my FAAB dollars. But if you can get him cheap, just ride him out. He's just like one of those hot streaks. It doesn't broadly, fantasy baseball, in situations like this, it's who's hot. If you can ride out that hot guy for a week or two, then, net positive, you're in business.
Yeah, especially when at this time of the year and, mid-August, you can't be too beholden to like what you think of a player long-term. And if a guy with, some pedigree and some past success is currently hitting and part of a good lineup, he's been batting like 5th for the Orioles too. I'm surprised at how much he's playing, frankly, but he is playing and he's hitting. I'd like to see a little more extra base pop. It's been a lot of singles so far, but getting some hits, and I mean, they're willing to stick Ryan O'Hearn in the outfield and move Colton Cowser over to center field, as you mentioned, at the expense of Cedric Mullins most days, in order to get Eloy's bat in the lineup. So if the Orioles are trusting him right now and he's hitting, he's worth it. Keep an eye on he probably is utility only position eligibility wise in some formats. That might be a little bit of a tricky situation. But where he is outfield eligible, I think he's definitely worth rostering just to see where it goes. We will get to our budget hitters and budget pitchers in a bit, but first, A message from our sponsor, Pick Six. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think you can eat that slice of pizza in under 30 seconds? Or I know it'll take you over a minute to download down that 2-liter. Seth, that seems like a game that you might actually play. If
Not
you
these
have,
days.
then you're gonna love Pick Six, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Here's how to play during the baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like runs, hits, strikeouts, or more. Take your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the new DraftKings Pick Six app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in Pick Six credits. That's code RWPicks. For new customers to play $5 and you get 50 in Pick Six credits only on DraftKings Pick Six. The crown is yours. 1 per new customer, non-withdrawable Pick Six credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.com. DraftKings.com/promos. And with that Pick Six ad read, we're going to go into a fun little Pick Six game. From tonight's later slate, there are 7 games from the 6 p.m. slate. And Seth and I are going to offer up a few picks. My first one, it's going to be Bobby Witt over 10.5 fantasy points. Now, that's a big number, 10.5 fantasy points, but Andre Palante has major reverse splits, 824 OPS versus right-handed batters, 559 OPS versus lefties. And Bobby Witt has also been much better against righties this season. He's got a 10-12 OPS against right-handed pitching. He's also been way better at Kauffman Stadium. I don't know. I would read anything into that, but they are playing at Kauffman Stadium tonight, if that matters to you. Mostly I'm just attacking a guy with reverse splits and fairly underwhelming stuff and a superstar in Bobby Witt. It is a big number, 10.5, but as we know, he can reach that number in a variety of ways, and he's a superstar, and I like him to hit it tonight. Who's your first guy, Seth?
So I'm going to go with Max Fried under 5.5 strikeouts. He is at Coors Field, which is the lead in the reasoning why I picked him. But if you look at, he's had 3 Coors Field starts in his career. He only has 10 strikeouts in 16 innings. They say, and I am not a physicist, but they say that the curveball does not work as well at Coors Field, and his out pitch is a curveball. Obviously, the Rockies strike out a lot, but we're at Coors Field, so I'm going with Max Fried on the under.
And my daughter, as you can hear in the background, is a big fan of that pick.
Appreciate it.
My next guy, Frankie, go downstairs, babe. No. Yes. Sorry, guys. Got a little one butting in on our podcast. My next pick, Cody Bellinger. Seth, go ahead and go for your next pick.
Sure. So the Fighting Grady Sizemores, otherwise known as the Chicago White Sox, they have Chris Flexen going tonight, who was atrocious in his last start. Overall has not been very good this year, but it is the White Sox. So I have the over 2.5 earned runs allowed. The total tonight is 9, which is a pretty high total in a non-Coors game, and the wind is blowing out. I think the forecast called for 14 mile per hour wind blowing out against Chris Flexen. So I think that's a pretty easy over there on the 2.5 earned runs allowed.
All right, I think our background noise has calmed down a bit, so I can go back to my Cody Bellinger pick. I got over 5.5 fantasy points, and it's a good segue into your Chris Flexen talk because he's going up against Chris Flexen. 891 OPS and 12 home runs allowed and 218 plate appearances versus lefties this year for Chris Flexen. And Bellinger has hit well since coming back off the injured list. 1007 OPS, 3 home runs in 9 games since returning. He's not playing the field because his finger apparently still bothers him like gripping a baseball, but hasn't really affected him at the plate. Reached base 4 times and had a home run last night. So I like him to exceed that point total against Chris Flexen. Your next guy, my friend.
So let's stay there in Chicago. Andrew Vaughn, the first baseman / DH of the Chicago White Sox. He's on a 5-game hitting streak. He had a home run yesterday, and I have the over 1.5 of hits plus runs plus RBIs. He's facing a lefty, which these days is almost all he hits. He has a 797 OPS against lefties. He's facing Justin Steele, and Justin Steele is also a ground ball pitcher. And for whatever it is worth, he's been hitting ground ball pitchers this year at a 793 OPS clip.
I like it. My last guy, we're going to go back to Coors Field on the other side. I'm going to go with Matt Olson over 8.5 fantasy points. And this is basically entirely the fact that Dakota Hudson is going to return to the Rockies rotation today, at least for one start. He was predictably awful for getting designated assignment earlier this season. Stuck around in the organization. They're giving him another shot. Olson has been slowed down a little bit in August, but he overall in the second half, in the last couple of weeks, he's done pretty well. 903 OPS, 5 home runs over his last 16 games. So Matt Olson at Coors Field against Dakota Hudson. I like it. And with that, let's move into our budget by pitchers for the week. And going back to that San Francisco bullpen, a guy that we mentioned earlier, Taylor Rogers having a great year. And of course, he's got the closing experience, 2.35 ERA, 53-15 strikeout to walk rate in 46 innings. He's actually been better against righties this season. That was the complete opposite last year. Last year, he got crushed by righties and dominated lefties. So I'm not sure exactly what is going on there, but I think the main point is he isn't necessarily beholden to matchups-based deployment. Like we mentioned earlier, Ryan Walker looks like he's at the top of the heap for saves right now, but Trevor Rogers having a great year also has that closing experience, so I think he should be on your radar in deeper formats. Your first guy, Mr. Trachtman, and our budget pitchers.
So a recent call-up who now looks like he will stay in the Twins rotation as a result of Joe Ryan's injury, and that is Louis Varland, who was a popular sleeper pick before this season who burned a lot of people. So Varland has been up and down throughout this year. He also burned a lot of people last year, if we're being honest. He was in the starting rotation and had 10 starts last year and was up and down before he got right in the bullpen late last year. So I'll say this about Varland. He is very home run prone, but for his career, he has about a strikeout per inning. He has decent command, decent control. The thing about Varland is because he is so home run prone, if I were in a league where I'm chasing ERA, I would probably not want to roster him. There's too much risk there with ruining your ERA, but other categories, because he gets strikeouts and because his control is decent, he's pretty good for the other categories. He doesn't have a lot of risk of exiting the rotation, at least for a month or so. So Varland seems like a decent, in this category of flyers, he seems like a decent pickup to just see what he can do. As I said, as long as you're not worried about ruining your ERA, he could be a guy that can help.
Yeah, I mean, I think yesterday against the Guardians, he really just had one bad inning. He went 4 scoreless the first 4 innings of that game. Then he made a terrible pitch to Josh Naylor on a 2-strike count, and Naylor hit a 3-run homer, and he was basically out of the game at that point. But I think as far as budget pitchers go, he's one that actually has a decent amount of upside. For my next pick, I'm going to stick with the Twins. Looks like Zebby Matthews might make his debut next week. I do think I'm with you that Louis Varland is probably going to hold down that 5 spot for the Twins for now, but the Twins do need to at least 1 spot start next week because they had a doubleheader this week. Sounds like Zebby Matthews is in the mix there. He's had an awesome year in the minors, 2.60 ERA. Check out the strikeout to walk rate. It's very Kevin Slowey-esque for our viewers who are old enough to remember
That's
Kevin
the
Slowey.
exact name that I was going to use. He gives me Kevin Slowey vibes.
114-7 strikeout to walk rate over 97 innings over 3 levels in the minors. Since going up to AAA, he's got a 5.68 ERA, but also a 23-1 strikeout to walk rate in 19 innings. I think the general consensus on Zebby Matthews is he's probably more of a floor play than a ceiling play. But I mean, compared to Kevin Slowey, I think his stuff is a little better. He actually reminds me maybe a little bit more of Brandon Pfaadt. Brandon Pfaadt also had those awesome strikeout to walk rates in the minors. People were worried that the fastball might be a little more hittable at the major league level. He could have some home run issues. I think the possibility is there for Zebby Matthews as well, but it's hard to ignore that strikeout to walk rate, and there might be an opportunity there. The Twins did not go out and get pitching help at the deadline, and they just lost Joe Ryan. Sounds like Chris Paddock is at least several weeks away from a potential return. So Zebby Matthews could get a shot, and I think he's worth a deep league flyer.
Yeah, I think the other thing about
Who we got next, Seth?
Well, I was just going to say about the Twins, they've never met a control pitcher that they did not like. So for many years. So my next pitcher is Drew Rasmussen, who is formerly an ace on the Rays, who is going to be pitching in relief for the rest of the year. I think he's actually opening today. He pitched 2 innings against the Cardinals in his first outing and was absolutely terrific. His velocity in that short spurt was up about 2 miles per hour above what it was last year before he got hurt. And he was pretty dominant before he got hurt. Excellent control, over strikeout per 9 last year. It was lower than that the year prior to that. He's an extreme ground ball pitcher. And, you know, one of the things that people are nervous about with these quote unquote middle relievers, which is kind of the role that he's going to play, is he's not going to help me in wins. And he's not going to help me in saves. But if he's doing 4 or 5 innings a week and absolutely dominant innings, I mean, that's a lot of help in ERA and WHIP. And especially if you have a bad matchup for one of your starting pitchers, you can plug in Rasmussen. I mean, he can absolutely help you in ERA and WHIP. And if you're chasing those 2 categories, he can be an excellent ad.
Yeah, I had to put Uncle Ted's comment up there because he's been harping on Drew Rasmussen for a few weeks. Eric and I had kind of dismissed it before because of the fact that he was coming back in the bullpen, but you know, you make good points that, you know, especially if you're struggling with those last couple of starters on your roster, Drew Rasmussen pitching fewer innings might give you certainly more stability than streaming some crappy starters at the end of your roster. And his stuff has looked all the way back from Tommy John. My final budget pitcher, it's going to be a lukewarm endorsement. I'll just say that up front. But John Brebbia, I mean, he's basically the last man standing in the White Sox bullpen. He has had a bit of a rough stretch lately. He has his ERA on the season up to 5.84, but you look at the strikeout to walk rate, 54 and 15 over 44 and 2/3 innings. He's pitched the 9th inning with a 4-run lead in the White Sox lone win over the last 24 games. That is a weird sentence to say, but I promise you it's accurate. And as Seth mentioned earlier, you know, the fan graphs, like wins projections, I don't know how many wins the White Sox are ultimately going to get, but I still feel pretty good about John Brebbia getting those potential save chances, however few there might be. And despite what the ERA says, I think he's still a pretty solid pitcher. So if it's a desperation saves play for sure. I would definitely target a guy like Ryan Walker well ahead of John Brebbia, even a guy like Michael Kopech, who's not currently a closer. I would target over John Brebbia as well, but I think he's definitely worth mentioning at the very least. Before we get into our budget by hitters, we have an ad from Home Run Forecast. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a baseball flies by 20%. Home Run Forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast Premium site offers index values for the hour by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction and speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. And we are back with our budget by hitters. Seth, why don't you lead us off with your first guy? He's a rookie from Houston, I believe.
Zach DeZenzo, who likely has different eligibility in different leagues. I know in NFBC right now he's a UT only. He might be third base in ESPN and Yahoo. He's a good prospect. He was almost 2020 last year in about 400 plate appearances. He had wrist trouble this year. He didn't really play until June. So he hasn't had a lot of plate appearances this year. I think he's had about 160 plate appearances this year. I think Houston is they've waited so long for Kyle Tucker that they're kind of in a desperate place right now where they need some hitting on that back end of the lineup. And John Singleton, he's better than Jose Abreu at this point, but he's really has not been doing a whole lot for them with a sub 700 OPS. So they're kind of seeing if DeZenzo can be that guy to just kind of prop up the back end of the lineup until hopefully they get Kyle Tucker back in the next month or so. So you look at how hitting call-ups have gone this year, and for the most part, they've been very unproductive. So he's not a guy that I would go all in on, but there's definitely 2020 upside there over a full season. He's going to play, at least for now. He'll have a little bit of a runway the next couple weeks to see what he can do. So for an AL only league or a deep 15+ mixed league, I mean, he's a flyer that you can go out and get and to see what he does. I'm not convinced he's going to do anything for you, but there's definitely enough upside there to see what happens.
Yep, I'm with you, and that it's a excellent point about the Astros really searching for production, especially at that first base spot. That's where DeZenzo has played the last couple of games and missed the first couple of months of the season with a wrist issue, but he's hit really well since coming back. My next guy is another guy who Uncle Ted brought up earlier in the chat. Go and give Uncle Ted another shout out there. Alex Call has been just absolutely crushing the ball since being recalled from the minors. 11 games. He's got a 1082 OPS, 1 home run, 4 stolen bases. He's been the everyday right fielder from the Nationals since they traded Lane Thomas. He's been hitting second regularly, actually hit first yesterday after CJ Abrams was scratched from the lineup. Hitting towards the top of that lineup. And the Nationals have been hyper aggressive in terms of stolen bases. Alex Call hasn't been a super high stolen base guy in the past, but he does have good speed. And you know what? If they can get Jesse Winker to get double digits in stolen bases, I feel pretty good about Alex Call getting on base and stealing some bases. And he's also got a little bit of power as well, getting reps at the top of a lineup. So I think he's pretty interesting, Alex Call. Who we got next on our list for you, Seth?
This is a great name, Seth Brown, the Oakland veteran power hitter, low average, 224 career hitter, but he does already have 10 home runs and 259 plate appearances. You kind of know what you're getting with him. You're getting low average, you're getting some pop, which in an AL only with power at a premium, I mean, power is power. I mean, as long as you're not too worried about your batting average or your OBP, he's fine. I will say, word of caution, this coming week, Oakland only plays 5 games, and 3 of them are against lefties. He should not and usually does not play against lefties. So you're probably only getting 2 games if you plug him in for a full week this week. So if you can bench him for the coming week, play him the following week, that would be my recommendation. But if you need power, he's sitting out there on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, Brown actually got designated for assignment earlier this season, but then predictably crushed the ball at AAA, got another chance, and he's actually hit pretty well since rejoining the A's. So it's not a high upside play, but he has been proven to hit for power in the past. So I like that as a deep league call. Adrian Del Castillo is my next guy. Walk-off home run for his first major league home run yesterday off of Jeff Hoffman, first pitch of the ninth, I believe. And their Diamondbacks walk-off win over the Phillies. Gone 4 for 7 with a double and that home run and 3 RBI in his first 2 games at the major league level. Keep in mind that this is basically a launching pad at Reno, but he put up some great numbers there. 10-10 OPS with 24 home runs in 100 games this season at Reno. And unfortunately, Gabriel Moreno looks like he's going to be out several weeks with that adductor strain. So I don't know that Del Castillo's defense is not his calling card. So I don't know if the Diamondbacks are totally going to trust him behind the plate on an everyday basis while Moreno is out. But I think he's got enough bat to where even if he gets 2 or 3 starts at catcher per week, maybe a start at DH, I think that could be worth rostering, especially in 2 catcher leagues.
You have to love 2 catcher leagues.
Yeah. I don't know about that, but if you're in them, Del Castillo is worth rostering. All right, finish us off with our final budget hitter. So
I'm going to have a controversial opinion for all Cardinal fans, but this final hitter is Victor Scott. Now the center fielder of the Cardinals, since Michael Ciani got injured with an oblique strain. He also started the year as their center fielder and played himself out of a job, could not hit at all, has been back in AAA, not hitting very much. I think his OPS was about 600. However, he made some mechanical adjustments with old Cardinal Ryan Ludwig and had been hitting for about 10 days prior to his call-up. He's been playing pretty much every day since his call-up. Outstanding defensively, absolutely elite speed, but he does not have a stolen base since he's been called up. He does have a home run, and he has seemed to be hitting the ball in the air, which I don't really think is what you want him to be doing. He's had some big clutch hits with the Cardinals so far, but he's only hitting 211. I think a long term, I would probably see his career as kind of a Dairon Blanco, 4th or 5th outfielder, great defense, great speed. I'm not sure he's ever going to hit consistently enough to be a regular. You don't really see those Michael Bourne types in the majors anymore, but if you need steals, absolutely. Hopefully he starts hitting the ball on the ground a little bit more and can get on base. And he's a stolen base threat, even though he's at the bottom of the lineup. If you need steals, he's an absolutely. I don't think you're going to find a better pickup the rest of the year as a short-term play in terms of his upside for stolen bases.
Yeah, you mentioned the Ryan Ludwig thing. That's what I was going to bring up. You beat me to it. But yeah, he convinced him to incorporate a leg kick and use his athleticism more, they said. And as you mentioned, big hit last night, 2-run double late in the game. He also had a game-tying home run. earlier this week. It's been frustrating on the few times he has gotten on base that he hasn't automatically just stolen second base. I'm anticipating him doing that more often going forward, hopefully. But yeah, I'm interested to see. I'm with you that might not be the best use of his skills if he's lofting the ball more, but certainly a super high upside guy in terms of stolen bases of Victor Scott. And it does look like the Cardinals are planning to play him regularly while Siani is out. And that will do it for this week's show. Thank you to our sponsor, Pick Six. Seth, buddy, appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll catch you next week. See ya.